Okay, y'all are gonna watch this while I'm baking because I have fixed time and I don't really care. Okay, general overview really quickly. Photosynthesis, chemical, like our sun, into chemical energy. That's the result. Okay, we have two different types of feeder. We have autotrophs and we have heterotrophs. Autotrophs feed themselves. They are plants. Let's think. Auto is self and troph is feeder. So an autotroph is a plant. It feeds itself. It takes the sun and spits out glucose, okay? Heterotroph, other feeder, meaning we're heterotrophs, okay? We get our energy from other things, other organic material. Okay, that's the first thing that we need to go over. Everybody flip to 187. We are going to look at the diagram of a chloroplast. Okay, the first thing that you need to know is that we have our leaf, and on the inside of the leaf, that is our mesophyll. Remember, meso is middle. Think of Mesoamerica. That's the other. Mesoamerica, it's between North and South America. Okay, middle. Meso and then phyll, you need to start recognizing that that means like a leaf or a plant or like some kind of pigment. Phyll. Okay, it's in the middle of that. That is where our chloroplast is located. We have to look at the structure of a chloroplast. We have three features that we need to really keep important, which is the thylakoid, the granum, stromal. Go to bed.
What was that?
That's an oven. About to make brownies. Go to bed.
Oh.
Ignore that. So a thylakoid, highly folded, that is where like most of our chemical reactions take place. Remember, if it's highly folded, it's probably because it needs that a lot of surface area. Thylakoid, highly folded. It's where our chemical reaction takes place. And then a stack of thylakoids is a granum, okay? Granum. And then outside of that and all that like fluidy thing, that's our stroma. That's where like the transfers take place. It's where the DNA is held. It's part of the endosymbiotic theory. Remember that. It's related to the endosymbiotic theory. Okay, and within our little thylakoids, remember where they take place because it's highly folded, is our chlorophyll. That's the green pigment. Okay, it's what gives a leaf its color. Okay, now let's talk about photosynthesis. We're moving on to the next page, and it's a good idea to look at these equations. Okay, so another thing to remember about the like structure of a leaf is that we have something called stomata. Our CO2 and our O2 have to get in and out of the leaf somehow, and our stomata is basically the portal between the outside of the leaf and straight to the chloroplast. It's our gap junction. Okay, now through that stomata, it's going to pull in CO2, and H2O comes from like the roots or like the leaf, wherever it needs to come from. Regardless, it's taking in CO2, and it's taking in H2O, and it's taking in light energy. Those three things are our reactants. They are what is beginning it. We are taking it in and we are spitting out glucose, which is our C6H12O6. It's spitting out the glucose, it is spitting out oxygen, and it is spitting out water again. So whenever you simplify it down, really it's just taking in more water than it's putting out. So you need to remember that water is a reactant but not necessarily a product. Okay, and water splits. It's one thing to remember is that whenever we're doing this, water is actually splitting, and it's one of the donators. Sorry, I'm really hot. Okay, and photosynthesis is a redox reaction. So our CO2 is being reduced and our water is becoming oxidized. You just need to remember it's a redox reaction, and you may need to remember which one is the reducer and which one is the oxidizer. Okay, now to actual photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is two parts. You have your light reactions and you have your Calvin cycle. I want you to look at the diagram on 189. This, I'm not going to doubt, it may not be on the first reading quiz. I'm not sure, but it would definitely be there. So it's a good thing to look at. Two processes, light reactions and Calvin cycle. Okay, I need to actually make my brownies. Beginning with our light reaction, this is where, let me get my thing out. Okay, this is where solar energy is converted into chemical energy, which is like our ATP. And in this case, NADPH. It's like NADH, our electron carrier for cellular respiration, except there's a P in there because it's photosynthesis. So just remember photosynthesis at the P. That may be a question, NADPH. So what happens is with your light reactions, you're taking in light and water. And this ultimately is going to spit out NADPH and ATP. Those are your products. Your reactants are light and H2O, and your products are NADPH, ATP, and oxygen, O2. Okay, now from there, our second stage is the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle. This is where you're actually making your glucose. Shoot, I need scissors. Screw this. I can't make freaking brownies. Okay, this is where your CO2 comes into play. Okay, so the Calvin cycle is going to take the CO2 and it's actually going to take that ATP and NADPH that we made with our light reaction. It's going to take it in and ultimately it will spit out a sugar, typically glucose, but it seems like in the chapter it varies. When we are talking about the Calvin cycle, carbon fixation comes in. Because remember how we talked about in the very, very beginning that CO2, like the leaf is all the originator of like any carbon molecule? That's the kind of ideal. Carbon fixation takes in CO2 and it makes, and it combines it with organic compounds. The whole basis of organic chemistry. Okay. Let's review some stuff and hit some stuff that I think that we may have missed. One thing that is, let's go back to light reactions. Remember, light reactions is taking in light, taking in water, spitting out O2, ATP, and NADPH. NADPHP. Another thing that it uses is photophosphorylation. This is basically how it makes the ATP. It uses ADP and I zoned out. It uses ADP and a phosphate, and it basically uses chemosis and the light reaction, like the energy from that, to generate an ATP. And that ATP and NADPH is taken, put into the Calvin cycle. And the Calvin cycle is what spits out the sugar. I really want you to look at the figure of 10.6 on 189. Okay? And remember, what is the reactants of photosynthesis? It is CO2, water, and light energy. Its products are glucose, oxygen, and the water is split. The mesophyll is on the inside of the leaf. The stomata is like what takes in and spits out the CO2, gives a pathway. Photosynthesis is sun, chemical energy. Autotrophs are self-feeders, leaves, plants generally. The heterotrophs are what we need to eat. We are heterotrophs because we eat other things to get energy. Okay. Chlorophyll is a green pigment. It is within our thylakoid. And there are two parts of photosynthesis: light reactions, Calvin cycle. We take in the light reactions, it is light and H2O. It spits out NADPH, ATP, O2. The Calvin cycle takes that ATP and NADPH, and then the CO2 that is coming in from the stomata, and it spits out a sugar. Do good.